In this short video, we will demonstrate how to find a dominant strategy and a dominated strategy. So let's consider the following game between player A and player B. I want you to notice that each player has three strategies. Player A's strategies are A1, A2, and A3. Player B's strategy are B1, B2, and B3. Player A chooses the row and player B chooses the column. We are going to do two things using this game. We're going to identify player A's dominant strategy, and we're also going to identify player B's dominated strategy. First things first, what is a dominant strategy? This is a strategy that yields a higher payoff no matter what your competitor does. So in order to find a dominant strategy, we're looking for a strategy whose payoffs are always better than the payoffs associated with the other strategies. I think the key to finding a dominant strategy is to look for the highest payoff. Conceptually, what I mean is I'm looking at player A. They have three strategies, A1, A2, and A3. And I know that if player A chooses A1 while player B chooses B1, so we're clear, focusing on B1 right here, then player A is going to get a payoff of 10. If they choose A2 when player B chooses B1, then they'll get a payoff of 9. And finally, if they choose A3 when player B chooses B1, they'll get a payoff of 12. So I like to start by looking down the column. The first number in each column, I pick out the biggest one, 12. And then I check to see, is A3 a dominant strategy? So I'm going to erase all this stuff here. Our focus is on A3. I observe that A3 yields the best payoff if player B chooses B1. If instead player 2 chooses B2, player A can get 8, 7, or 9. 9 is clearly the highest. And then finally, if player B chooses B3, player A can get 12, 11, or 14. 14 is clearly the highest. So I want you to notice what's happening here. For player A, no matter what they think player B is going to do, they want to choose A3 because it always yields the highest possible payoff. In particular, 12 is bigger than 9 and 10. 9 is bigger than 7 and 8. 14 is bigger than 11 and 12. As I mentioned, I always like to start by looking down that first column, picking the biggest number, and then checking to see if that is a dominant strategy. It's the most efficient way of finding it. So player A's dominant strategy is A3. Now we can answer question 2. Let's erase all this. It was so fun. We want to answer question 2. It says identify player B's dominated strategy. Let's remind ourselves what a dominated strategy is. It's a strategy that you would never choose. In particular, it's a strategy whereby there is some other strategy that always yields a higher payoff. Now we're asking to find player B's dominated strategy. I want you to remember that player B gets the second number in each box. So if player B chooses B1, they'll get 12, 3, or 10. If they choose B2, they'll get 8, 6, or 4. And if they choose B3, they'll get 10, 8, or 5. We want to compare these columns and pick the one that's like worst, or in a sense, pick the one that there's always something that's better. There's no like necessarily ideal strategy to solving one of these things. It's more of a feel. It's clear that B1 cannot be dominated because B1 yields 12 if player 1 chooses A1, and 12 is bigger than 8 and 10. So we know B1 isn't a possibility. So we'll move on to B2 and see if B2 is dominated. And we do this by comparing. So I want you to notice that if player B chooses B2, they'll get 8. And if instead they chose B1, they would get 12. Similarly, that's when player A chooses A1. Heading down the column, if player B chooses B2 and player A chooses A2, then player B gets 6. If instead they change their strategy to B1, they would only get 3. So it's clear to me that B2 is not dominated by B1 because sometimes B1 is preferred, but other times B2 is preferred. Now that doesn't mean that B2 isn't a dominated strategy, it just means it's not dominated by B1. So let's start comparing the orange highlight with the green. 8 is less than 10. I put that in the wrong direction. Sorry, everybody. Less than 10. So if player A chooses A1, player B clearly wants to choose B3, not B2. Similarly, 8 is greater than 6, so B3 yields a better payoff than B2. And finally, 5 is bigger than 4, so B3 yields a higher payoff than B2. So we have our dominated strategy, B2. Make sure you understand why. Because player B always prefers to choose B3, no matter what they think their competition is going to do, because B3 always yields a higher payoff. So that's how we find our dominant and dominated strategies. It's more of a conceptual thing and knowing how to read these tables to identify, is there a strategy you would always follow? And is there a strategy you would never follow?